We're live. We're here.
I love. Look at
I'm
my
glad
hair.
you're I'm glad you're beanie-less because I could check out the full deal.
Haircut,
Do you like that I just always wear the C.A.Y.A merch?
as you should. I actually really love that tank. It's so cute.
I love this one too. You've seen the back. It's like pretty big.
I love it. I love
Do you
it.
know? Okay. Well,
What's
Marshawn,
our
are we
topic?
do you know or do
Oh,
I
I
have to
know.
tell?
We're talking about. We're talking tonight about teaching full time or part time, and kind of what that looks like. I was thinking about this just before we got on the call. For for you, and I think that everyone thinks about this differently.
Mhm.
For you, what is the main difference of teaching part time and full time?
Yeah, I think we should talk about this. I think there's just personal qualifications of what full-time or part-time means, and I think it's going to be really dependent on where you live, how much places pay, and how much you need to get by. So it could be really different depending on those circumstances.
Also, like, how are you getting your income from teaching? I mean, there's different ways to get income from teaching. Are we
Totally.
talking
Let's
classes? Are we talking trainings? Are we talking workshops? There's different ways to get to receive income as a teacher. So all of those variables also come into play. For me, when I first started teaching, just because I didn't know the industry as well, and I actually kind of still feel like this now, is like, how many public classes can I teach a week to sustain my life,
Mhm. I
to
think a
pay
lot
rent?
of people I think a lot of people think that's what they have to do, and for like it is a good marketing tool. Like your public classes are a good way. It's a good pool of people to carry over to other things, but there are so many other options. I think we should talk about um, full time versus part time. Let's break that down. And if we had to give like a class number, I'm gonna just say from what I've seen on like yoga liability insurance, that if you teach 10 classes or less, it's usually you get like a discounted rate for your insurance, and that's considered part time. Whereas if you teach over 10 classes a week, according to the insurance, that is full time. However, in a city like Chicago, full time teachers are probably teaching 15 plus classes a week
I would
if
say,
they're
yeah.
full time. I think you're probably more around the 20 class, which is totally a lot. The 20 class mark is like I've been polling people today on our Instagram, and also it goes to Facebook, and I got more response to Facebook saying that a lot of full-time teachers teach around 20 classes a week. A lot of part-time are teaching like under 7.
Mhm.
So,
I also think that um, we
yeah.
should discuss kind of like I love teaching full time. Like, I'm not complaining about teaching full time, but I think the reality of teaching full time for me is different than a lot of what people think it may be like. And we were talking about this last week. I've taught 15 to 20 classes a week now for about 5 years. And so people are like, oh, you're only working 15 hours. But in reality, I'm working more than 40 hours a week because I'm spending the majority of my time traveling. I
Yeah.
don't teach one location. So for years, I taught at C.A.C., I taught at Barefeet, I taught at Studio 3, I taught corporate. I mean, like, I was teaching, like, I was covering so much ground of the city.
Sorry, my dog is crying. Yes, I think we should talk about teaching full-time doesn't mean you're at one place for one salary. Like you have to diversify the places that you teach. They're going to pay different ways. Some might pay per head, some might pay a flat rate. And so this is also going to factor into how you make the decision of how many classes you need teach. If you're doing a per head type of agreement with a lot of places, you're not guaranteed a specific income. For me, when I was teaching a lot of per head classes, I would have to cover a lot more. I would have my set schedule and I would cover depending on my attendance. So that changes a lot too.
From my experience from teaching in Chicago for a while now, the majority of the places I teach, and maybe this is just like where I've taught, is a set rate. Like you get paid
Mm-hmm.
X amount of dollars to teach a class, no matter how many people come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there, like you're saying, there are pros and cons to both. But for me personally, having more of a set, like this is how much I'm going to make a week, gave me less anxiety.
Mm-hmm. I think it would give a lot of people less anxiety. I mean, just from like I've waited tables for like 10 years, like it would be the same thing. Like you're not guaranteed income. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the just like logistics of teaching full time. I think we've already laid out that you probably have to teach at a bunch of different places. You have to factor in the commute. That's something that you were alluding to. Is like you and I talked about this privately the other day. It's like I won't take a job that's like a 30-minute commute just because then it's a full hour added on to that hour you're paid for. So like for example, if especially if you're a newer teacher and you're just starting, for example, if you're getting paid, let's just say $40 for the class and it takes you 30 minutes to get to and from, in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's only $20. So these are things that you have to really think about when you're taking jobs is like, how long is the commute time? How are you getting there? We live in a city, sometimes paying for the train fare or paying parking, you have to factor that in as well. Like
Or
I used to work
you're getting
I used to
you're
work
getting
somewhere where I was getting, yeah, sorry.
no, keep going.
I was just going to say, I used to work somewhere where I was getting paid per head. And if one student showed up, I didn't make anything. I broke even on that
Mhm.
commute. So, this will affect where you teach, how far you're willing to commute, and and all these things that go into it. What are the other logistics that you can think of?
Well, I just want to kind of add on to like the teaching full time and the logistics of like, like travel and all these kinds of things. It's a catch 22 because I was very young when I started teaching yoga and I didn't have a lot of money. So like the fact that someone's going to pay me to even practice, I was just blown away, or to teach. I was like, oh my God, someone's going to pay me. Um, and within that, like I wasn't making a lot of money at the beginning, but the hustle pays off,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So it's just like, yes, and for years I've been going from place to place to place to place to place, but I've met a lot of people. And
Mm-hmm.
so the return later in my teaching has been greater because of that.
That's a
Um,
really good point. It's a really good point because you were saying yes to more in the beginning, and it has opened a lot of doors for
exactly.
you.
Yeah. So
I
I
think.
think, but I also think that within a lot of industry, there's a hustle. And like
Mhm.
when I, tell people about what it was like to teach full time when I first started teaching, I think at the beginning I had 17 classes a week. I was teaching in the West Loop. I was teaching in Lakeview. I was literally teaching everywhere in the city. And people are like, oh, you're going to burn out. You're crazy. And I'm like, I think I was a little crazy, but I don't know. I don't know.
You were young and you had the energy
I
and you
had
were enthusiastic.
and I had no money. I think that like when someone's like I want to quit my job and I want to start teaching yoga. And I'm like, okay, well, how much money were you making prior to that? They're like, I was making $75,000 a year. I'm like, well, just so you know, you can make that money teaching. Absolutely. But that's not going to happen for a while
Hmm.
unless you have a following on Instagram, well, either, certain things, but, that it takes time. And then I'm like, this is what my schedule is like. I was teaching 6 days a week. I was teaching 17 classes a week at different locations. And they're like, oh, like the
Yeah.
expectation of what it's like to teach yoga is not the reality. Not that the
Hmm.
reality is horrible, but it's work. It's a hustle.
Yeah, I think we're going to be really realistic in this conversation. And if it seems negative, it's,
It's
I,
negative. I think.
it, I don't want it to come off negative. It's just the truth of like, it's a tough industry. And then I
Mm.
think we'll end with a couple of the positives about it just to like go
Well,
on that high note.
sorry. I want to give you a positive right now. Is like I was riding the
Sure.
bike with my boyfriend yesterday, and I was like, I'm so happy I don't work a 9 to 5. You know, like because I had
Mhm.
that time in the day to like it was gorgeous outside to visit some friends, to like go out and eat, and like no matter how hard the hustle is, I never want to work to 9 to 5. That's just like not how I operate. And like, yes, it's challenging, but I still love it, and I'm so grateful every day that I can teach full time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. No 9 to 5. Um, I want to go back to what you said about even teaching 15 hours a week. It's not 15 hours. There's the commute, and then there's also class planning, making
Preparation,
like,
yeah.
yeah, promotion, playlists. There's so many things, so many unpaid hours that go into those, whatever
Further
number. What's that? Further
further education.
education? Yeah, so they all this outside time that people don't see, I honestly look at it as like unpaid labor that we have to, if we're committed and passionate, that we're putting into this. And not to mention that we don't get insurance or benefits or anything else. So um, these are really huge deals. I think if you're a newer teacher trying to decide to if you're going to teach full time or part time, first of all, I would say it takes a while to build up a schedule to be full time. So if you have a side gig or a part time job, keep it for a while until you can find that comfortable amount of classes, that comfortable like number that like, we're going to talk about the business side of things, and we're living, in 2021. We have to like pay rent and feed ourselves, and we can't just always be of service for um, just out of the goodness of our hearts. We have real needs and concerns. So there will be a little bit of this business talk. Yeah. But what do you think for newer teachers deciding full time or part time? Do you have advice? Do you agree?
I do. I think that like there's no rush to make a decision right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not a better teacher if you teach part time or full time. Like it's not like, oh, I this is the only thing I'm doing, so like that makes me a better teacher. I think that that's crazy. I think that everyone's life and their experience teaching is really different, and there's so many factors that come into play. For me, the reason I started teaching full time was what I've already mentioned, which I was really young, I had a lot of energy, and I didn't have any money. And it's really easy to take a leap of faith when you don't have a lot. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
more thing when you're coming from maybe a more established career. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
smarter to take your time, even if you want to take, teach full time and that's your end goal, to like really to feel it out and know that there's no rush to like make that switch, and it doesn't make you a better teacher by teaching more classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was teaching, I've done both full time and part time. Right now, just pandemic and the way schedule has changed, I have less classes than I've ever had, but I'm still doing this full time, which is the strangest position for me to be in. And I think a lot of people might relate to this over the last year. But as someone who's done both, I can say from experience that having something else is really it alleviates a lot of concern. Like
Or
my background has been in arts administration, and up until the pandemic, I was working part time for the city of Chicago, programming cultural events and stuff. And before that, doing stuff in real estate and in the art world and whatever. And um, even still, the least amount of classes, besides when I was very new and building up, that I would maintain on a regular schedule was around 7 classes. But up until recently, pandemic stuff, I was always at 12 classes permanent. And then I would aim to pick up 3 to 5 additional classes in covering. And so I've always left this like window to cover, but like 12 classes for me a week was the number I really enjoyed. I didn't feel burnt out. I didn't feel like I had too much free time either. So, it was a good balance for me. I'm also someone who really likes to be busier more than be idle. So, so, and that's me as like part-time working for the city, 12 classes is what I'm saying. I think it's going to be really personal. Yeah, I thought you were going to say something, so I just paused.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that one good thing about one good thing about teaching part-time or full-time is usually within both of those scenarios, you have options to pick up, right? So like
Hmm.
that's like even as a part-time teacher, you have options to get to sub and like so you can slowly start to you can start to kind of navigate that like okay, I'm going to add a couple classes this week. I'm going to sub and like see how that feels. Oh, that's too
Hmm.
much. That's little. I think that teaching in a couple places where you have opportunities to sub and like see what it's like to teach a little bit more is a great way to kind of gauge that.
Hmm. I feel like sometimes, well, like even right now, one of the studios I'm teaching at, I'm subbing more than I'm on the regular schedule. And I'm really grateful that I'm able to do that because then I get to know the community more. And then, should I get more classes, I don't feel like I'm just totally new. I think there's a certain number of classes, and maybe I'm changing topics a little bit, but there's a certain number of classes you want to have at each studio so you feel like you know the students and
Yeah,
community.
so you have kind of like foundation there. You have some like
Yeah.
student. Yeah, totally.
Do you feel,
Uh,
what's your minimum number at a studio that you feel like is a good way to build a foundation?
I think that's an interesting question because I think it also depends on time of the
Hmm.
class. So, like, say you're at a studio only once a week, but you teach at 6 p.m. on Wednesday night or Tuesday night. You don't need to teach at 9, 3 days a week, 9 a.m. You just like, you have that one that's a popular class. So, if you're lucky enough to get a good time slot, it doesn't matter as much.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Because I'm just thinking about my own experiences with, you know, bad time slots. I'm like, oh man.
Well,
Um,
you said too, like, um, for me, a lot of like my success teaching in the city, well, there's a couple reasons. One, I'm perceived as like, I am white, absolutely. But like people perceive me also as like a male. It's easier to get vinyasa teaching jobs, I really do think, as a man, without a doubt. And also the time. Like I just happened to like get a certification, be at a studio, they needed teachers, and so I got classes right away, which I don't think is the norm.
mhm.
Like good times. So it's like I was right place, right time, and lucky and
Yeah.
privileged.
Well, honestly, I'm always, I don't know if impressed is the word, but I love to hear you speak so candidly about it. You've been teaching longer than I have, and you've been in
I'm betting.
Chicago longer than I have. And I think we don't, as yoga teachers, hear a lot about the journeys we've all been through. Like, there's not really at least in my grasp, in my reach, there's not like a huge network to like talk about this stuff. And I love how open you are about it. So thank
I want
you.
to. Can I add one more thing? And like we
Of
talk about,
course.
but like the if you want to get more classes or you want opportunity to teach more classes, part time or full time, teach at gyms.
Oh yeah, we talk about this a
We
lot.
talk all the
Yeah.
time. Teach at gyms. Teach at gyms. You'll meet the most people. You'll get the most experience teaching. I can't say enough about teaching at gyms. Jen is probably so tired of hearing about it. But
No, it's
I,
true though.
I am such a big, like, teach at gyms yoga teacher because I think there's this perception like the yoga is not that good at gyms, and that is not true. That is not true. There's some amazing teachers that teach at gyms,
Hmm.
and you meet tons of people, and
Yeah.
usually locations within the city, they have many locations. Like there's more opportunity to pick up, to teach in different neighborhoods. Like to me, it's just like a hard yes.
I agree. I taught at a gym in Florida when I first started. I also think if you're a new teacher, it's an it's an easier place to get into without as much pressure. I don't know if that was just me, but like the
I,
audition process seemed a little bit easier, a little bit like chill. And you have access to a really big network at those, especially the big box gyms. It might not be the best pay, but it's a good foot in the door.
it's also another job where the pay not be as much, but the payoff may be more. For
Mm-hmm.
example, retreats, workshops, things that you whatever you do as a yoga teacher, if you tell those people to find you and where they are, those people will come. A lot
I
of
will
people
say though,
have been from gyms.
I will say it depends on the gym because I used to work at a very like
Shitty, awful gym. It was disgusting. I can't believe she worked there. I'm just kidding. I,
he's joking, but I used to work at a gym that just wasn't like the nicest facility, but also the membership was really affordable. And then it was really hard to turn my student base there into paying customers
you
because
were on
they
Florida. I think the market's a little different in Chicago.
yeah, this was Florida. It was a very, very big, like the only gym in town that everyone went to. So there wasn't competition, there wasn't options. But since all the group fitness classes are included with the membership, it was hard to like sell things there that were outside. So it's going to depend. And I know we have students with C.A.Y.A, like we have students all over now, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Massachusetts, and so on. So depending on where you are, you're going to have to like do your own market research. But one thing we didn't talk about is whether you're teaching full time or part time. There's so many different places you can teach, and as Bradshaw's saying, gyms are one of them, studios are another one. You could also get creative. You can teach public classes, get your permit, set
Or
that up, be your own boss. Essentially, you are your own boss anyway. But the thing that I was going to say is private lessons. So when I was in Florida, I was teaching very few group classes and more privates, which I think is atypical. I probably had, and this is as a new teacher, I think I had, I can't even remember, just a handful of classes at maybe like 5 classes between a studio and a gym, but I had like 7 privates a week. And so I had more privates than I had group classes for the first year. And that was great because little secret, I don't know if it's a secret, but you can charge more for your privates. And depending on where you live, do your research of what the going rate is and then price yourself accordingly. If you're new, I recommend that you price yourself in line with the average and then, you know, advocate yourself, make up that price as soon as you
that's a
can.
whole different conversation that we can talk
Yeah,
about.
that's a whole different conversation. But like you were saying, full time or part time, if you're full time teaching, it doesn't mean you're only at group fitness. You might be doing privates, you might be doing corporate, you might be doing workshops and other things that you supplement.
It just means that all you're doing is teaching yoga in some facet.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Yeah,
all your
since all the income comes from some form of yoga related stuff.
yeah.
I think something that we've been exploring is doing these teacher trainings and workshops and like really branching off of the offerings that we can give as yoga teachers.
Totally.
So I think we should wrap up with some advice. I love to give advice. But my first line of advice would be if you're a new teacher and you have a part time job, stay there for a while, dip your toes in the water, start to add more classes to your schedule. And then if you could reduce your schedule somewhere else, just like a slow progression into it if you do want to go full time. It's always nice to have that security and cushion.
Can I give my advice?
Yes.
My advice is teaching part time or full time doesn't make you a better or worse yoga teacher. If you love teaching yoga, find a way to teach it. part-time or full-time. They're just two different beasts, and they both have pros and cons. Um, and I think that's my good advice. That's it.
I want to add one other, because I'm such a like practical thinker. I would actually write down the number you need to make like a year and kind of go backwards from there and do the math of what you need to bring in monthly and then what you need to bring in per class, per how many classes you want to teach a week. So kind of just like narrow down and then set that as your goal. So whatever the goal is, get to the point, write it down, and make it happen. And then lastly, I wanted to end on a positive note, and I love what Bradshaw said, just like go and do it, figure it out. Um, One really great thing about being a yoga teacher is that we can choose when we want to work. Which do we want to have morning classes? Do we want to have night classes? Do we want to keep, I call it the bookends, our whole day free, but have that like 6:30 and the 6:30 a.m. and the 6 p.m. So if you're essentially your own boss in a sense where you can, um, you're an independent contractor. You can design the classes that fit into the vision you're building for yourself. And having that sort of freedom is really awesome. Plus, you get to do something you love and inspire people and keep yourself inspired. So, as hard as it is to be full time, there are so many great things about it. That was the positive, uplifting note that I wanted to end on.
Well, I love it. I love, love, love teaching full time. I think with any job, Gianna, there are things that are challenging and things that are great. And like there's more things that are great about teaching yoga part-time or full-time than not great. So whatever you choose to do, part-time or full-time, enjoy teaching and enjoy connecting with people because it's an amazing career and an amazing job.
Yeah, I think in my mind, I thought we would like expose what a day in our life looks like, and then it was going to sound like really discouraging and like, and just like crazy. Like, Bradshaw, if you described your like, I don't know, Friday schedule to someone, they'd be like, what, you know? So,
Yeah.
so in my mind, it was like, okay, we gotta build it up. But thank you all for watching. We will be back next week. Do you have anything else to add, Bradshaw?
Uh, no, if anyone has questions about teaching full-time or part-time and like you want to talk, feel free to, DM Gianna, Kaya, or me personally. We'd be more than willing to connect with you. We really enjoy talking to teachers. So thanks for watching and enjoy your night.
It's true. Okay. Bye,
Bye, Gianna.
everyone.
Love you. Bye.